we're so glad to have you join us today. I'm Phil Brasfield, Director of Destiny Ministries, and welcome to this last Zoom session of the Bigger, Better, Stronger program. And we've got more people coming in that are joining us, and we're delighted to have you all today. And so we're just going to give you a minute to get logged in and get settled in for a good conversation with our special guest today, Pastor Rex Johnson. I'll make that introduction just in a moment. But we're so delighted to have you to join us. I see folks logging in from around the country, and we appreciate you taking the time today to be a part of this conversation. And Amos, you want to take a second and just give them a little bit of lay of the land in terms of chatting and questions, or any of those things that they might like to know how to do.
Yes, sir. It'd be my pleasure. Thanks to you all for joining us today. It's going to be a great day. I'm really excited to hear Pastor Johnson's, all his content was so good on the video, and a little bit about maybe some speaking, some sermon prep. I'm probably as excited about that as anything. As you guys know, we're rounding the bend, the last turn on this bigger, better, stronger campaign. There's so much incredible content that's been put out. You can access all of that on destinyleaders.com. If you haven't, you want to check out the podcast. The last few podcasts have been on this content as well. And I really encourage you to jump on board. I know it's rounding its last turn, but jump on board on that Facebook group. There's been some great interaction, and honestly, a great way to meet different people, to connect with some different leaders as well. So if you have any questions today, you can put it in the chat down there, and I'll do my best to pass that along as quickly as possible to Dr. Brasfield and Pastor Rex. But other than that, Dr. Brasfield, I think that's it.
All right. Thanks, Amos. And we are excited today to have this special guest join us. It's going to be a ton of fun. As Amos says, if you have not participated or been all plugged into the Bigger, Better, Stronger program up to this point, it's not too late. You can go out to destinyleaders.com/connect, and all of the content's there for you. Each of the videos from our presenters and also the Zoom conversations are available there. Articles that were written, and what we've seen, and Landon and I have talked about this, what we've seen is a really nice course on spiritual leadership develop, an 8-week course filled with great content. And so it's going to live on. That's the beauty of these campaigns, is we do them live together. And then for those who don't participate with us in that or can't for whatever reason, they can access them later in a view on demand and listen on demand format. So from the podcast to all the videos, the articles that are written, even some of the blog posts, it's all going to be there for you. I also want to give you a heads up about a magazine edition that's going to be coming out. Our fall and winter edition of the Destiny magazine is in final preps right now. I've seen mock-ups. It's looking great, filled with all kind of wonderful content that you're going to want to make sure that you avail yourself of and get part of that. So it should be in your boxes, God willing. It should be in your boxes sometime mid-November, just before Thanksgiving, and you can kick off your holidays with Destiny as we deliver a magazine in your box. One of the great communicators of our generation, that's how I'm describing Pastor Rex, one of the great communicators of our generation. If you listen to the video, that's just a sample. You ought to go out and do yourself a favor, go out to Christian Life Austin, Google them, and listen to this incredibly gifted man preach and teach the Word of God. What they've done at Christian Life is nothing short of miraculous anyway. A great church that God has raised up, founded by Pastor Rex and his lovely wife Patty and their family, and led by them as well. And is ministering to thousands of people in the Austin Metroplex area, and really reaching around the world. And I want to tell you, it's one of my favorite places to preach. It is so much fun. Those people know how to get with you and pull the good stuff out of a preacher. And Pastor Rex, thank you for joining us today. The video that you prepared for us was great. We're going to talk about that. But I'm just going to kick this thing off right off the bat by asking you to share a few nuggets of how you go about preparing a message and what you're thinking about, your thought process in the process of preparing a message, because you are a pulpiteer extraordinaire. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you one more thing. I posted in the comment section that listening to Rex Johnson is like watching Picasso or Rembrandt paint a portrait. He's a master. He's one of the ancient masters.
Yeah. Talk to the hand. Hey, good to see everybody. And I know a bunch of you. There's Ben. I know Ben Sanders, and I know Clint Sylvester, and I know Kathy. Brother John, have we met? I don't know if we've met or not. There's Brother Tom Lowe, and there's Brother Jared, and there's Mark. I love y'all. Mark, we got some family members coming to your church, buddy, in just a little while. From Houston, they're moving to your area, and they're going to come to your church. So, Dr. Phil, it was an honor. It was an honor to be asked, and it was an honor to prepare, and it was an honor to give. No stress at all. It was just a fun time. I have a great team here that helps me and put things together and film stuff. And so I was excited to do it. I have a face for radio, but I had to be on a screen. So that's how it is. But anyhow, it was a joy. And I thank you for the privilege and the opportunity to do that. And, when you asked me about the cost of ministry, the first thing I try to do, and I'm not going to make this lengthy because everybody has their own method. I'm not going to try to change your method, but when you ask me about the cost of ministry, the first thing I try to do is say, what can I positive that with? What can I put positive with that? I want to be a lifter. I want to have an elevator heart. I want to elevate people. I want the tide that I bring rise all the people, bring all the boats up, not to an emotional high, but just to a spiritual plateau that they can walk out and face society. We live in a world that is pecking our church to death. The devil's trying to wear out the saints. He really, really is. And so my ministry is really to try to find positive things in the Word of God, and it is the good news. And so, and I was with an evangelist the other day, and he said, I've been preaching a little bad news, trying to get people serious. And I said, okay. And I just kind of laughed about it. But Jesus went about helping people. And I think if we're going to be his ambassadors, we need to help people. We need to lift people because we don't really realize how they really are, what they really are facing in life until we realize what they faced in life when we sometimes bury them. But the joy of ministering to people is just a very high calling for me. I love everybody. I guess there's one that I don't love, and he rules the other world. But the bottom line is that people are precious. And so when you frame a thought, when you get a thought, you try to find something that will bring the best out of them, that will bring gold out of dust. And you try to make that happen in their world. And so when you gave me this thesis on the cost of ministry, I could have talked about how it hurts the family, how it breaks up things, and how it's hard to get up and it's hard to fight the fight in the church and all. But then when you look at the positive side, what we need to do as leaders of congregations is just keep our word. Let's just keep our word. Just be promise keepers. Just say, I will do a thing and go do it and make it happen. And then have a tremendous spirit of forgiveness. And I'll get into that, Dr. Phil, in a little while, this forgiveness thing, because it happened in my life right here. And then, of course, being a worshiper. The worst thing that I think I see when I go places many times is that pastors and leaders of churches, they feel like that they're on a certain plane and everybody else is not on that plane. Jesus walked among the people, not above the people, but among the people. And I think that a true worshiper, a pastor, a leader, a teacher, a Sunday school person, a praise and worship person ought to be worshipers. We ought to be worshipers. Amen. King David taught me that. He said 7 times a day, I'm going to praise him. And so David was a tremendous worshiper and praiser, and he wrote about it. And so the joy of that to me is the cost of ministry. And so the cost is really not heavy. It's not a heavy toll. It's not a heavy cost. It is a beautiful cost. It's a beautiful price to pay. It's a beautiful thing to lay down at night and say, I've kept my word. I've kept my word, and I've established something with these people. They're going to trust me. We need people we need to be trustworthy people and be somebody that somebody can say, I trust that person. And that doesn't put us in a God position. It just puts us in a leadership position where people can say, there's somebody representing him that I can lean on and believe. And then, of course, the ability to forgive, And I don't know if I need to go into this right now, Dr. Phil, but I will a little bit later. I'll wait. And then the third one, of course, is to be a worshiper. But how I prepare a sermon, I guess I'm getting ready for Sunday. I'm not speaking tonight. We're online tonight, and I have our youth pastor speaking, our young adult pastor speaking tonight. And I will speak the Sunday before election. And I will speak the Wednesday, our first Wednesday, the first day after the election, when we probably still won't know the answers to what happened in the election. But anyhow, so I'm really trying to dig deep and trying to find something. So the two words that just came to me that I'm building on right now is just the two words, choose life. I said before you, life and death, choose life. So I'm just trying to build on choose life. So I'm going through everything. I'm going to talk about a shepherd who said, if there's two legs and a piece of an ear, I'm going to make you live. The shepherd that said, I saw you in your blood and I spoke to you and said, live, and you lived. In other words, I saw you in your pollution. And so God is always trying to lift people to a life, to living. He's a living God. He's a living entity. There were two trees in the garden, tree of life, tree of knowledge of good and evil. One of them got raptured and made it to heaven. In Revelation 22, the tree of life is in heaven. We'll eat that for the rest of our days when we get there. So all this stuff, once I get a title, once I get something in my spirit, and I'm just throwing things out. Once I get something in my spirit like that, then I flesh it out, and I do everything I can to find everything I can find on that, and then just tie the thoughts together and put a little humor, I guess, every now and then in it, or something, that little illustration. And I got a message. I don't get to, I used to preach at some conferences and stuff when they wanted 55 minutes out of you.
Yeah.
That's a long time to preach. So you had to have a lot of hallelujahs and a lot of response from the congregation, because there's not that much in anybody.
Yeah.
Because no seat can endure 55 minutes if it's not good. And so now I preach 27 to 30 minutes on Sunday, but I do it 3 times, but it's a whole lot. There's Delbert Herron. Delbert, I love you, buddy. But what a joy to just prepare things for the Lord and to get things together. And another thing I want to tell you, the man that influenced my life the most was John Kershaw. John Kershaw was an Arab man. Many of you know who he was. He died a couple of years ago, I think 3 this November. And I was privileged to do his funeral. He was a mentor to me. I sat under him in college when I went to school and received the calling to preach the gospel in his church. And he doubted it. He told me, he said, when I told him I was called to preach, he said, you're no more called to preach than a piano. My Lord, get out there and be a doctor or something. Be a dentist and go work on my teeth when I get old and lose my teeth. I mean, he just made fun of it. And so when he came back, he is going to preach a conference in California. He said, please don't go to Africa while I'm in California. Stay here so I can talk some sense into your head. And Brother Kershaw uncalled about 20 young men in his church, but he couldn't uncall me. And when he left, there was a fire brewing in me, and I thought, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. And God said, that's the wrong reason, son, but I'm going to show him. And it wasn't until I was about 45 years old, that I heard words of compliments from him, that he believed, this was from 20 to 45, that he believed that God had called me to the ministry. He was just very difficult, but it was what I needed in my life. I needed to be challenged. I needed to be told that I couldn't do something, and then I'd walk through hell to do it. I would do that. When I was challenged like that, I guess that competitive nature in me. But Brother Kershaw taught me something, and this is good for everybody. This is not me, this is him. He said, find the obscure, find the unique, find not the normal story. Don't find the normal story. He said, you can bring the normal story in, but preach something outside the lines, and then ratify it and make it flesh out with normal stories. In other words, find unique thoughts, find unique texts. And Papa K was good. He was good at that. He had that old school in him. He had the Arab mindset, the Jewish. He was tremendous in prophecy. I never have been. I'm not tremendous in anything. But at the same time, he was great in that. But he knew how to take something that was off the beaten path and use the highway of preaching to get off the beaten path into your spirit, and you'd never forget it. I heard him preach one time over the cellars of oil was Joash. And he just talked about a man being in the cellar that lit the palace. A cellar dweller lit the palace. And he walked on that thing for good night. He walked. He had so many cellar dwellers that lit the palace, because they took the oil and they made the oil for the palace and they lit it. And it was just, he knew how to take the obscure and make it very obvious.
Yes.
So I guess that's the method that I have used, Dr. Field. I just use the obscure and, try to find things, I preached a sermon years ago about, and I put it in my book. By the way, if any of you guys would like to have this little book that I wrote back 2004, if you'll send me the money to send it to you, I'll give it to you free. If you'll just order it, send me about $3 to mail it to you, because we're in a building program. I'll send you this free. It's a little book that I think it's called With a Palm and a Willow. I don't know if any of you ever heard of it, but anyhow, if you'll do that, I'll send it to you. I've made enough money on it. I don't need to sell it. I need to send it to you. Dr. Field's got his. But anyhow, the bottom line is that there's a story in here that I researched years ago when I was still in St. Louis. And it's a story of a man named Ahiezer, who became the captain of the tribe of Dan. And it's not in the Bible, but it's in history. I had this history book, and it wasn't anything written by Jewish people. It was a history book that he did one thing in life. And this is something that I use a lot of in my own mindset. He changed the ensign, the flag that Dan walked under, from a serpent to an eagle. And so that has so many ramifications. And it's in this book. Has so many ramifications because a serpent is cold-blooded, an eagle's warm-blooded. A serpent is blind during certain times of the year. An eagle has got eagle eyes. One soars and the other crawls, and one seeks to look for a thermal to lift it up, and the other runs and hides from the wind and the storm. And so it's just a flip mindset. And so everywhere I go, I try to implement not that story, but that mindset that I've got to change people's thinking. I got to change your thinking. Romans 12:2 says, "Be not conformed, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And so the beauty of preaching is to transform minds of people. And so that's what I study for. That's what I do. And of course, I am a heart preacher, and I believe that people ought to see your vulnerableness. I think they ought to see your passion, and they ought to see your compassion. They ought to see that you care about them.
Amen.
And when they do, and they realize you're a promise keeper, you'll forgive them, and you'll worship with them, I think you can build a church. In fact, I tell my staff all the time, Dr. Field, this ain't about sermon preparation. I tell them 3 things you need to do. You need to keep your nose clean. You need to love people. You need to preach truth, and you'll build a church. And it's in that order. It's not preaching truth and loving people and keeping clean. It's keeping clean first. It's having character. God's committed to character, not charisma. And so the joy of preaching to people is the longevity of knowing that when you go to bed at night, you don't have any skeletons, and you just wake up in the morning, and it's just another great day. So that's how I prepare my sermons. I hope that helps a little bit. That's how I do it. So right now, if anybody wants to send me something on Choose Life, I'll take it and I'll implement it in my sermon, a thought or story, whatever.
Such great advice, Pastor Rex. Thank you so much. And that was as much for me as probably for anyone online, because I've just enjoyed so much the style of ministry, and your style of communicating has been so, I engage with it and connect with it. And I know that's why you have this blowing up church down there, because so many others do as well. And
they're not blowing up right now. We got COVID down here. I don't know what y'all got up there. We're about 35% back is all, man. It's pitiful. I got people that's got new lifestyles now, it's not go to church lifestyles.
Right. Well, this COVID's going to pass. We're believing it's going to pass, but thank you for sharing that. And it blessed me, and I know it did as well. As a matter of fact, that was worth just dialing in right there, to get some nuggets from a master about how you put together not only a great sermon, but a great church. Let's talk just a little bit about the theme about keeping promises, because that's something that is in short supply these days, where people, and I think the culture has become so conditioned that they look at everything with skepticism. It doesn't matter what news channel you watch with skepticism. It doesn't, that you're getting elements of truth, but then there's a lot of untruth mixed in. Mm-hmm. So let's just talk about, from your video, the power and importance of being a promise keeper. I thought you brought it out so powerfully, but let's drill down on that just a little bit more.
Okay. I think this is just what I think. And it may not resonate with anybody. I think the pastor of a church or the leadership of churches ought to be the most liked person in town. I think they ought to be able to be mayor. I think every store you go in, every dry cleaners you go in, every place, you need to go in with can I use the term, an all shucks attitude? And I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to condemn you. I'm not here to be king over you. I'm here to be your friend. And I think that when people, when they see that you are approachable, I think that's why Jesus was such a, he was so approachable. Kids ran up to him. And I think that we need an approachable ministry. We need a Levite group of people that are approachable, that just absolutely, don't run from people, but embrace that. I've been in so many churches, Dr. Phil, and I'm building this church on how I wasn't raised. I'm building this church in a negative concept of how I wasn't raised, because I was in churches of 30 and 40 people, and I couldn't talk to my pastor. I mean, I couldn't. And I'm not run crazy. I may counsel 3 hours a month. I mean, I'm not run crazy with people, but I'm approachable. Anytime somebody can come up and just say, Pastor, would you pray for me about this? Well, we'll do it right now. We'll do it right now. And in 25, 30 seconds, I've prayed. They've moved on. I'm happy because I got to minister. They're happy because they got to be prayed over. And so the joy of that is that you get to a point where that people trust you. So then you tell them, okay, we're in this building program, and we're wanting to be in the building by December the 20th. So I've been making some comments and say, folks, we're going to have Christmas in the new building, December 20th. And that was 8 weeks from this last Sunday. And so on Monday, we had this meeting, and we found out the doors that we need, the fireproof doors that we need, won't be until the 21st of December. And so in that meeting, I wasn't preaching. I said, no, that is not going to happen. We got to find some doors at Waco. We got to find some doors in Galveston or Houston somewhere, because we're just getting them shipped from California. I said, California's out of business right now. And I made a promise to these people, we're going to try to get in that church. And you know what? We found some doors, Dr. Phil. We found some doors, and we're going to have them in the next 3 weeks. So it'll be easy to be in that building with a rough opening. So the thing that I started doing when I was a young man, of course, y'all know I lost my first wife and little boy, and that was a crusher. That was a crusher, because that little fella was my dearest friend, and so I made him promises. I made him promises, but I made him a promise on the day he died. I made him a promise on the day he died. It was the 13th of March. And I paid my bills on the 1st and the 15th. And so it was 13th, and I was writing out my bills. And he wanted to go outside and play wiffle ball. He was 4 years old, and he was a major leaguer ready to happen. He could hit a ball, man. He could hit it. And he wanted to go outside and play ball. And I said, son, I'll do it. We'll do it in just a little while. We'll do it. Well, the little while never got there. It never got there. And I thought, well, we'll play tomorrow. They had to leave, go to the mall, and I had to leave, and I was going to Duncan, Oklahoma, to dedicate a church for Brother David Husband on that same Friday. And so I get to the church, the phone call is ringing, come to a certain corner. I go to that corner, my little boy and my wife are gone. That pierced my soul. And so I said I would never be caught short. Those bills, I could have paid those bills on the 14th, But I told him, I said, son, I'm trying to keep a wolf away from the door. Okay. I'm trying to keep the wolf. You know what I'm talking about. The wolf is going to come and devour you because you don't pay your bills. And he goes to the door, opens it up, and comes back and he said, Daddy, I've been out there. There's no wolf at the door. Come on, let's go play ball.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And I lost a boy that I felt like I broke a promise to. So I said, no more. And for the last 39, 40 years, I've been a promise keeper. You just got to do it. You got to do it. And you got to be intentional in doing it. You got to do it. And so I've got 3 spoiled daughters now, the daughter that survived and the 2 daughters that from Patty. And I've got 3 spoiled daughters now because I've kept every one of their promises. I told them I was going to get them some ice cream. Bless God, we'd get some ice cream. I mean, we're going to do it. I'm going to do what I say. And you know what? When you get to living that way, it's a pretty good life. It's a pretty good life. And,
Yes, sir, it is.
And it keeps your family intact. And all 3 of my daughters are in ministry. The oldest one is our office manager. The middle one is the executive pastor's wife. They'll be the lead pastor here probably the next year. And the little one, her husband is our AVL director in the church. He's a resident genius, and the girls sing beautifully, and all my family's saved, and I'm very happy. And if I left the church, they'd be the first to come out and get me and put me in the altar, say, Daddy, get it right. You know, they just are that kind of kids. And so, sure. And I think it's because we just kept our word. We kept our word with our daughters, and we were direct in that. We were impromptu. We made it happen. We made it happen. A lot of times I'd say, and Patty'd say, baby, let's do it. Let's do it. We got to do this. And so we would do it. And when I'd get through, I'd always smile. But now it's just almost second nature. It's just second nature. And then forgiveness. Let me tell you a little bit about forgiveness. I mentioned that in the thing. I was taught that lesson in 1998. I've always thought that I was an affable kind of guy and loved people, loved everybody, and called everybody Bo. And you know, I got tired of hearing that doc stuff in the Pentecostal faith, so I just said, "Listen, I'll just call them Bo. I'm tired of doc because there ain't no doctors. That's just crowning them with something that they ain't got." That's just my thought. I'm sorry. But I you know, I didn't hold grudges. I'm not a grudge holder, and that's not complimenting me. I just didn't do it. But when I lost my wife and boy, 17 years later, right here in Austin, in 1998, we'd taken a church that had probably about the first Sunday I was here had 22 people in the audience, and the rest of them was in Sunday school, probably about 16, 18 kids in Sunday school, probably about 40 in church that day. And we left a nice, wonderful church in DeRidder, Louisiana, a wonderful church, large church. I love the people. They love me. But I knew I wanted a challenge, and so we were here. And so that was in 1990. And in 1998, we'd built the first new building. We'd built a 600-seat auditorium next door. And we first moved in there, I thought we'd be like a BB in a boxcar. And it was. But we started growing. And in 98, a year after we got in 97, we built it in 96, 97. I was in the auditorium just praying, walking, and I said, God, I really need to know how to grow a church. And I said, I've been to conferences, and I've heard people talk, and I've heard people speak, and I've tried this method and that method, but help me. And the Lord said, can you forgive? And I said, yes, Lord, I forgive all the time. I said, I don't hold anything against people. I forgive. I forgive here, and I forgive there, and I forgive. And he said, could you forgive the man that took your wife and boy's life? I said, well, Lord, I think I have. I said, it's been 17 years. I don't even hardly think about him, especially in a negative way. He said, could you pastor him? I said, now, God, wait a minute. You're getting a little deep there. It's a little bit deep right there. And so help me, guys. And I have people here who are my witness. 3 days after I prayed that prayer, a knock came on our office door in that building over there, a new building. And a man stood there, and when he was a Hispanic guy, and when my secretary answered, he said, I'm looking for a man named Rex Johnson. Is he here? She said, yes. He said, I need to talk to him. So we thought it was somebody that needed money. He was gonna ask for money, because we have people like that. Y'all, I don't guess y'all have those at y'all's church, but we have that at our church. And so I went in Vicky's office instead of mine. Vicky's been my secretary forever. I think she was secretary here in World War II. No, I'm teasing. But anyhow, so we go in her office, and this guy just kneels down on the other side of the desk, and he said, I've got to confess something to you. He said, 17 years ago, I destroyed your family in Dallas, Texas. And it just hit me upside the head. I mean, it just absolutely stifled me. And so I said, really? He said, yeah, I did. And he's bawling. And he said, I've come to ask your forgiveness. He said, I didn't go to prison for the deed, and he didn't, because it was in the paper. He got a sentence of probation, and 10 years probation. Didn't go to jail. But he said, I broke probation 4 times, and I've been in prison 17 years and 6 months of the 18 years. Of the 17 years, I've been in prison 16 years. He was in prison 17 years. It's 1998. And he said, all but 6 months. And he said, I can't stay out of trouble. And he said, the last time I was in prison, he said, the prison chaplain came, and I received the Lord in my life, and God changed me. And he said, I went to the chaplain, I went to the ward, and I said, what can I do to stay out of this place? And they said, you need to ask forgiveness. Said, the reason you're here is because you're still holding sin. You need to ask for forgiveness. And said, you need to find this man. And so he said, I found you, sir, and I want to ask you forgiveness. He's on his knees. He's bawling. His whole shirt is just covered with tears. So I come around, I hug him, and I forgave him. And it was quite a moment. Dr. Phil, it was quite a moment. And so when I backed off of him and just said, I forgive you, and go in peace, and you'll be all right. I'm good. I'm glad we got this clear. He said, I got a question. Will you pastor us? I want to bring my family here. They live in Dallas. Will you pastor us? And I said, yeah, I will. And they came in 1998, and they left somewhere in the between 06 and 07, stayed about 8.5 years with me. And this is the part that I enjoy telling. I never told my congregation. Never told them. Never preached about it. I didn't want him to be glorified. I didn't want him to be abused. I wanted him to be just a person walking in the church. Never preached about it until he went back home. And then I said, you know what? I can write about it now. I can share it. It's not in here, but I can share it. And so I started sharing it a little bit, and then I shared it openly, I think, at a conference in Houston one night. And my brother-in-laws came up to him and said, why didn't you tell us this story? And I said, I just didn't want to do it. But that happened. So I learned that you can forgive the biggest, the greatest. And then this worship thing is always been my pet peeve. I love to worship God. I just love it. I love to worship God. And the Lord said, if any man be a worshiper, him God heareth. And so I just know that God hears me when I worship, and he hears me when I ask him for thoughts and for concepts. He hears me when I ask, because he loves worship. He inhabits praise, but he loves worshipers. He loves people that adore him just because he's him. And so that's the concept of how I live my life. That's it.
Wow. I have to say I'm taken back. I didn't know that part of the story. Obviously, I've got the book and have been through the book.
No, it's not. I didn't put it in there because he was still here at that time.
And now looking back on your message, it speaks deeply to me. The promise for forgiveness and worshiping. I mean, what
Dr. Phil, he wasn't a good saint. He was a problem. In fact, I had a guy here that was probably the smartest guy I ever pastored. He was a creative writer. He helped me pen the book. I would give my concepts and he would write, and I'd give my concepts and he would write. Charles is a great guy, and he's pastor now in East Texas, senior pastor in East Texas at a church, a Pentecostal church. And he also understood conflict and resolution. And so So this guy would bring his family, because it was his family, her family, and their family, that kind of thing. It was just a mess. And it never was a problem against the church. We just had to solve his problems continually. And I would go up there and I'd say, sick them, Charles, just get him, just wear them out, just get them straight, and they'll be back next month. And sometime we'd meet them 2 times a month, 3 times a month one time, because he just lived in this perpetual, just a perpetual hell because of the guilt he felt for taking lives. He just lived in this, and he could not get it behind him, and we'd pray for him and pray for him. And I think just before he left, he might have got victory over that. And I remember when he came to me, he was in his 30s. He's in his 30s, and he had a oxygen tank that he had to push around in his 30s. He just, I hope he survived the COVID situation. He lives in Dallas, and I hope he survived the COVID situation. But it was just one of those things, and it was just problem, not to the church. He didn't cause division in the church, just his family. And it was just a tough time to pastor him. So I learned how to forgive every day, how to forgive that situation every day.
such powerful insight. Amos, why don't we bring you into this conversation? Back to the video that the message that Pastor Rex shared. What was it that maybe spoke most to you out of the message that he shared?
All of it was so good, Pastor Rex. I've been taking notes too, by the way. That story was so meaningful for me, and helps connect the dots so well. I was thinking about the particular point in the video that stood out so much to me was when you were talking about David and Mephibosheth, and you talked about as he came back into the palace, it wasn't his behavior that kept him in the palace, but it was the promise. And I would love to hear you just and kind of expound on that thought a little bit. It was very insightful for me.
Well, David and Jonathan were tight. They were not only brother-in-laws, they were best friends. I mean, that was David. That was David's kinfolk. He is married to Michal, and so I think when David said, "Is there any of the house of Saul?" he didn't say Jonathan. He said Saul, because Saul, even though he was his father-in-law, was an arch enemy. Saul chased him for 10 years, tried to take him out, and David had a couple of chances to take Saul out, and he didn't. But the bottom line of that whole thing is that the promise was to find somebody in Saul's house, because you guys, everybody on this board knows, kings that were in reign took out kings' kids from the former reign. I mean, it was slaughter time. But he said, "Is there any of the house of Saul I can help?" And so they said, "There's a lame prince." And so I think David was moved on the fact that he had an opportunity to do something good for a man that wanted to do evil against him. And I think God saw that. God saw that David's heart was right. He was a man after God's own heart, Acts 13:22. And he said, "I see that." And I really believe that this is maybe one of the reasons David didn't see death when he messed up a couple of chapters down the road with Bathsheba. I think it's the reason God spared him, took the son, but spared him, because David had such a mercy and such a grace, Old Testament word in my mind, a grace toward Mephibosheth. The guy he really was so lame, he couldn't do anything. He just fell down when they brought him in the palace. He just fell down, laid him prostrate. And so the bottom line is that David's promise not only exceeded his mind towards Saul, but also his love for Jonathan. That was Jonathan's boy. And so I just think that it shows, Brother Amos, in that story when Absalom took over 15 years later, and Ziba runs away with David and says Mephibosheth chose to stay with Absalom. And so David comes back and he asked Mephibosheth, and he said, "No, I just couldn't go, and Ziba wouldn't take me because I had 2 bad legs." And David never asked him to prove that point, because it didn't matter. It didn't matter to David, because when David chose to show mercy and grace, I mean, it didn't matter what happened. Nothing was going to change that mindset. Nothing. And that's what made David a man after God's own heart. He made his mind up, I'm going to show this young man mercy. So it wasn't what he was. And David was also, I think, showing his kids, hey, he may have his wounds on the outside. Y'all got some on the inside that's pretty tough, and y'all can hide them with your regalness and royalty, but you're hurting too. And so I just think it's a powerful story of forgiveness. It's a powerful story of forgiveness, and also keeping your promise, because he kept his promise to Jonathan, although he said, I need somebody from Saul's house. So those things just kind of speak to me. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. So good.
Yeah.
If I could jump in, because that point spoke to me so clearly as well, that there are moments in our life that the promises we've made should hold us in difficult situations.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing you say, Pastor Rex.
Yes.
That as a leader, part of the development of my spiritual leadership is learning to keep my word to my own pain, to keep my word at my own expense. And in David, even after the rebellion that you just referred to, if there was a time that he could have come back and said, you had your chance, Mephibosheth, you're out now, and I'm justified in doing it. Mm-hmm. Yet it wasn't Mephibosheth's right behavior, but David's promise that compelled him to the degree that he didn't really even mention it. I thought it was so powerful in your message that.
And Dr. Phil, I never read where Mephibosheth got his healing.
Right.
But he never had to leave the table.
Never had to leave the table.
Never.
So
I had no boy like that. I didn't tell some story. I had no boy like that. Sat in a balcony on the middle row, front row, right in the middle for 10 years. Just sat up there and watched me preach. Now, he loved me. He brought me chocolate covered strawberries every year at Valentine for my wife. He loved us. He'd drop $10 in the offering. He'd always come by and say, good job, preacher, but he never made a move to God. And I said, Lord, one day I said, Lord, he's taking up space up there. He's just taking up space. We need somebody up there that'll come know Jesus. But the Lord just put him right there in the middle of my eyesight. His name was Eddie. And one day I just, I wasn't even thinking about Eddie that day. And I saw him get up and walk down to the aisle, walk down to the altar, down the stairs, came down and said, I want to serve the Lord, Pastor. Gave his heart to the Lord. I water baptized him. And it was just a great day. And the Lord said, that's your Mephibosheth. That's him. You let him sit at the table all these years.
That's awesome.
Pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Pretty cool.
Landon, unmute and jump in here on this. You're such a great thinker and a great presenter of scripture. What in the video, was there a part of it that speaks to you or that you'd like to ask a question about?
Yes, sir. So Pastor Rex always, just as Dr. Brassfield said, is like listening to a true master communicator. Just your demeanor, not only the content of what you say, but how you present it. It's just such a blessing for, I used to say for young leaders like myself, but now there's another generation coming up. I don't know how that happened so quickly. So that's why I'm growing out the beard to try to.
You didn't have that when Pastor Brett was on. You've grown that since Pastor Brett was on, didn't you?
No, I don't know. I'm afraid of what he still signs the paycheck, so I have to. I don't know how you feel about it. But Pastor Rex, one thing that I thought about was the culture is changing, and you said that the pastor, the leader, should be one of the most well-liked people in the community, known for character, known for, but people maybe in my generation, particularly the generation beneath me, or coming up next, seem to be anti-institution. So seem to just be a little bit distrusting of authority figures. So how have you given that much thought of how you uphold that reputation of a pastor in a generation that seems to not esteem the role as much as previous generations did?
Well, that's a good question. And I hope this answer is not too simple for you, because you've got a great mind, a wonderful mind, but I don't come with authority. I don't come with authority. I come as a friend. I meet people as a friend. Young men work for me. I have a young staff, and they're my friends. And that other part is their desire, what they want. they either catch on or they don't catch on. But I don't try to dominate anybody, not anybody. Now I can talk your ear off, but I don't try to dominate anybody. I'm not a dominator. I just don't do that. That's just not how I operate. And Patty wouldn't let me if I tried anyhow. She's tougher than I am, and smarter than me. By the way, I want to share this with all y'all. The wife that y'all married probably smarter than all you guys. Mine is, I admit it. But
mine is because she's watching.
Is she watching?
She's watching. So.
Oh, that's so sweet. I love you, baby girl. But anyhow, the joy of this is that you don't come across as an authoritarian. You don't do that. You come across as a friend and somebody that'll, like old Louis L'Amour said, you can ride the river with, somebody that you could. Now, don't ask me to go hunting because I don't hunt. Don't ask me to go fishing because I don't fish, but I'll play golf with you all day long and we'll have fun. And if you beat me, it's all right. Didn't used to be that way, but it's all right now. But it's just the joy of people are my joy. I live by 5 theses, by 5 things. And I stole a couple of these from a Baptist minister up in Indiana. I can't even think of his name right now. I used to get his tapes all the time. But God is my passion. I live by this. I put this in my Bible when I was 23 years old. Family's what matters. People, the longest finger. People are my purpose. Money will never be the reason I preach the gospel, and friends will always be my friends. And that's what I've lived on all my life. And so there's nothing in there that says I'm better than, I'm greater than. I just, I can be a friend to the janitor at a HEB. And I can be a friend to the greeter at Walmart. I can stop and have a conversation with him. Not just trying to impress him, but just people. People are my business. People is what I do. It's not about building churches, building people. And the churches will come, So
that's so good.
That's how we do it here in Austin. That's how I do it. And it's just
I had a young lady this weekend in Barbie Height in Nelson Heights' daughter in Corinth, Mississippi. We were talking in a leadership team circle, and she said that something really profound that a young person said to her land. And I thought about what you asked about the generation. She said that this young person told this person that was leading that their authenticity was their authority.
That's excellent. I'll steal that.
Their authenticity is their authority. Yeah. And I thought, wow, that's
who you are.
Yeah, that's who you are. And people, even if they disagree with you politically, if they disagree with your views on anything, they respect the fact that you're real. And then with what Pastor Rex said, when you love them and you're real, it just multiplies the factors of that impact tremendously.
Nothing like the power of love. Nothing like it. And not wanting something out of it, but just giving it unconditionally, Yeah. And you all know that when Jesus questioned Peter in John 21, he said, do you love me? He said, I love you, Lord. He asked agape. He got phileo back. He said, Peter, do you love me? He said, I love you, Lord. He asked agape. He got phileo back. And the third time he asked him, he said, do you love me? He said, phileo. And Peter was offended because he knew it was a different love. He said, Lord, you know that I love you. He said, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. Yeah. So Jesus got down on his level so he could bring Peter up to his level, because he wants us all to love unconditionally, not just brotherly love, but love unconditionally. That's the beautiful thing about the Lord. He pulls us up to where he's at.
That I have to jump in just a second and do a quick commercial about our campaign for this fall that's kicking off. It's circulating now. There's a 4-part series with it, and it's Destiny's answer to all of the controversy and all the social upheaval and unrest. We know it's not the total answer. It's our beginning point. And that campaign is called Love First. Love First. Awesome. And we've taken the position, we've made a decision that before we judge, before we accuse, before we answer back, we're going to lead with love. Until we have loved to the full extent of our capabilities, we're not going to have an opinion about criticizing someone, even though you were certainly entitled to our opinions, but love first. And I think that goes right along with what you just said, Pastor Rex. Well, we're moving down we're kind of coming down the last few minutes of our time together, Pastor Rex. And again, we're so thankful for your time and your wisdom and the incredible job you did. in this, our whole theme has been
Thanks
spiritual.
thanks for the wonderful gift from you and Kathy too. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are more than welcome.
We got it the other day, and we're going to go eat out on that.
Awesome. Awesome. Our theme has been bigger, better, stronger in the context of spiritual leadership. We've been reading the book by J. Oswald Sanders on spiritual leadership. If you were going to give kind of a closing summation, advice to all of us about how to develop strong core spiritual leadership, not just leadership skills and techniques and nuts and bolts, but the spiritual side of leadership, what closing advice would you give us for our time today?
Well, I think if you're going to be stronger, one can put 1,000, two can put, the rest of it. I think building a strong team that has the same intention, the same purpose, the same goals. I've been privileged here in Austin to know some wonderful people. I got the privilege of Barry Bum Phillips, the football coach for the Houston Oilers, and got to run with Coach Landry many days. Probably played numerous rounds of golf with him, probably 80 to 100 rounds of golf with him. Coach Darrell Royal was my dad's friend in high school, and I became his surrogate son here. And I was around these guys that knew how to get things done. And Coach Akers was a member of my church here for a while. He's got dementia now. He and Diane used to come here. And so just being around these guys that know how to do that kind of business, it's an amazing thing. The theme that I saw in all of them is that even though they coached, they always elevated. They could fuss at them. They could fuss at somebody, but they'd turn that fuss around to a compliment. You're here because you're the best. You're here because you're the best. And I watched, I'd go out and watch Coach Brown run the horns. And with Coach Akers, he'd come by and get me. We'd go watch the horns. And I'm not saying this to drop names. God just put me in some circles with people. And I'd go out and I'd listen to Coach Mac Brown. Not a kinder man you'll ever be around than Mac Brown. He's just a kind soul. And I was his, we was pen pals. I wrote him every week and he'd write me back, and I'd always compliment him, even if they lost, But Coach Brown knew how to make a team strong, I'll never forget one day I said, Coach, you got some good runners here today. And he said, yeah, but the problem, preacher, is getting them all running the same direction at the same time. And so he said, when I get that done, he said, I'll have a strong team. Well, all that stuff I put in my brain, and I'm thinking, that's what I need to do. I've got to bring this person in. I got to bring this person. This person will not relate to what this one will. So I need to know what channel they run on. And I've got to have somebody on my staff or somebody in my life that can reach that person. And so we try to involve and just reach out our arms and bring everybody to us. Just bring everybody to the kingdom. And it's a big pull sometime. It really, really is. And it's going to be a tough time for us, Dr. Field, on the backside of this pandemic to get everybody rallied again. But we had something precious going here on the other side of the pandemic back in February and March. We had some good stuff going. But the bottom line is that I think the way to get bigger is to show your heart more. The way to get better is to prepare and give yourself the best you can without expecting somebody to come by and pat you on the back. Because when you pastor 30 years at a place and you've been 50 years in ministry, you're like an old shoe, but you're comfortable. It's just good to be around. And so that to me, the older we get, the more mature we get, we ought to be better in everything we do. And then attach yourself to people. I start at the back, stronger. Attach yourself to people that have your mindset. Be an ahaizer, change the mindset from a serpent to an eagle, and let them soar with you. Let them see the results with you. I don't baptize anymore. I don't baptize. My staff baptizes. I want those people to feel involved in that. I want them to feel involved. And, I used to sing a little bit in church, but I hadn't sung in a long time. And I fuss about it sometime, about not getting to sing. And Randy just grins, and I'll never be singing again anymore because That's not, I don't need to do that anymore. But the bottom line is, I think to incorporate as many people as you can that will see the plan of God the way you see it. And I think that you'll have a strong thing. It's foolish to think you can do it by yourself. Just you and your wife, you can't do it. You need people to help you do it. And people are the answer. That third finger right there, that's the answer. It's the answer. The people are my passion. That's what it's about. And so we try to build people, and we're stronger, better together.